All right, welcome APES Scholars. This is our third and final live stream review session for the 2024 APES exam session. We are going to be going through tonight some math and experimental design FRQ tips. The FRQ is the section of the exam, or I should say the FRQ section of the exam, is where I think you can still have the biggest impact on your exam score, even with just one night to study still. At this point, your MCQ kind of is what it is. You can do a little bit of Unit 9 review, but you really want to make sure you brush up on these FRQ tips. So this is what we're going to be focusing on tonight. Try to get us in and started a little bit quicker than normal, since at 7:45 I have to hop off and go to the Ultimate Review Packet live stream Q&A session. But you guys get the drill by now. You know that we start off here with the LaCroix crack. We got peach pear tonight. Peach pear. So let's get that LaCroix cracked. Last night when I did it, I put it right in the mic, and then I listened to the replay for a minute and noticed it like definitely blew the mic out for a second. So I'll keep it all the way out here. All right. Excellent. Peach pear solid. I don't have peach pear often, but it's a good one. All right. Let's make the most of our time here. So we're going to get into experimental design tips. First, actually, we'll start off with some general FRQ tips. At this point, you guys kind of know the drill here. If you are in any of these three boats in terms of your exam preparedness, how ready you're feeling, you can click the link that's in the slideshow for this kind of what to do based on where you are. These slides are linked in the video description. So you can go to the video description and check that out. All right, questions. I'll try to answer questions at breaks in between our different segments tonight. I'll also try to do shout outs and donations at breaks in our different stopping points. All of the proceeds on super chats, super thanks, whatever you call them, all of those are going to a local environmental nonprofit. And we're over $300 so far. You guys are very generous. So this is not, $300 that I'm extracting from the APES community. We're going to put this to a good cause, to an environmental science nonprofit that my students will vote on. And we'll give everybody an update after the exam is done on what they picked. So I will try to do those super chats at the breaks. All right, here's what our outline looks for tonight. We're going to do general FRQ tips. So what are the things that will hopefully help you improve your chances of passing that exam tonight? What can you try to do tonight from a skill standpoint to be in a better position to pass that exam? Then we'll go into experimental design specifically. Then we'll go into then we'll go into math FRQ tips specifically. And then we will try to play a little Kahoot at the end. But unfortunately, Kahoot's capped at 400. So we'll see who's the fastest to sign in, because there's 1,200 right now. So the first 400 lucky people will get into Kahoot, I guess. I can post the Kahoot in like a playthrough at student pace mode link after we're done, but that's the best I can do. All right, so here's some general FRQ tips. The very number one tip I have is go through all 6 sets of released FRQs from 2021 to 2023. That's 6 FRQs, 6 sets of FRQs, because there's 2 per year, an East Coast version and a West Coast version. The reason you want to go through those, and the reason I'm going to go through them right now with you and just do a quick walkthrough, is so that you're comfortable when you look at them on tomorrow's test and you're not surprised by the format. You're not surprised to see experimental design right at the beginning. You're not surprised to see math at the end. You're not surprised to see a graph, map, or figure in the middle. So let's actually do this. Let's look at some released FRQs together quickly. So all you have to do is Google APES FRQ, and this will pop right up. You'll be on AP Central's website. So all you have to do is Google APES FRQs to get here. And then the reason you want to look at 21, 22, and 23 is these are after the redesign. There was a redesign in 2019 like the fall of 2019. So 2019 is outdated from a format standpoint. Content's fine, but the format's outdated. And then 2020 was COVID year. So they're all in AP Classroom. You can't see them on the internet. On the public internet, I should say, to sign into AP Classroom. But we can start looking back at 2021, 2022, and 2023. These are super, super helpful. So you can open the questions first. Let's just kind of see what you're going to see tomorrow when you open this up. You're going to expect that on FRQ number 1, there's going to be an experimental design. You're really going to want to read this background carefully. If you read the background carefully, oops, sorry, I need to switch tabs. There we go. If you read the background for this experiment carefully, you're going to find answers like what is the control group right in the background. You just quote right from the paragraph and you're good to go. What is the scientific question? You're going to be able to figure that out if you can identify the independent and dependent variables in a second. And I'm going to go through using this actual example question after I give you some tips. But I just want you to know FRQ number 1 is going to have a few relatively easy questions to earn because they're just based on the paragraph. They typically don't require a ton of actual APES knowledge. Same thing if we look down here. All we have to do is identify the plot with the lowest soil temperature. So we at least have like one gimme question that we should hopefully just be able to pick right out. And so you want to get these first to kind of build your confidence. You do not need to write in full sentences for an identify. For example, letter D here. Based on the table, identify the plot with the lowest soil temperature. Just say plot D and keep it pushing. Move on. However, identify the scientific question. You do need a full sentence here. You need something like, what is the effect of genetically modifying green beans on their yield? Or will genetically modifying green beans produce more yield than unmodified green beans? So Alex, this is a good question. You don't have to respond in full sentences on identifies, but I do think you should push for more than like 1 or 2 words if you're identifying the control group or a variable. And we'll get to why that is in a minute. This is a good question. On an explain though, you're going to want probably 2 sentences. There's nothing magic about 2 sentences. It's just 2 sentences is usually what it takes to provide adequate detail to earn the point. But great question, Alex. All right. Then you're going to have some questions that are just kind of like APES content, like G, H, I, J. All of these are just straight up like, do you remember the APES content here? Then when you get to question 2, there's going to be a map or a graph or a figure or something like that. So you can see here, we've got this map with the manatee range and their temperature, and sometimes they're by the power plant, sometimes they're by the seagrass. And so again, we're going to have a pretty easy question right off the bat. Identify the temperature range of the water through which the majority of the adult manatees' daily movement occurs. So they're spending, the vast majority in this circle to square range, and that's all you really have to do is give that range, or I should say the circle to circle range. So it's not too difficult of a question if you carefully read the graph. You're going to have a few questions based on the graph, and then you're going to have some general questions that, again, are just straight like APES recall. And then you're going to have a propose a solution. You want to try to make sure your solution that you propose is realistic and specific. So who's going to enact it, or like where is it going to happen? You don't want to just say like make rain gardens. You want to say something like plant rain gardens in areas of the city that will intercept runoff before they go into the estuary. So really expand on your solution a little bit. Then in the justify, this is like, what's an additional advantage? So like other than, relating to the manatees, why is it good to reduce the nutrients going into the estuary? Hopefully your brain's going to eutrophication here. Kevin's got a good question here that I want to throw up on the screen. We are going to go over some math questions and dimensional analysis. That's coming up before too long. All right. Question number 3 is where we have 4 content-based questions and then 3 math questions, each 2 points, 1 for correct setup, 1 for correct answer. You do want to include units in your answer and setup. Sometimes they don't require the units if it's in the question stem like calculate the number of grams. But it's just safe to always include your units. So I would just err on the side of caution and always include your units on the math questions. 2 points, again, one for setup, one for the correct answer. Okay, that's what you're going to see when you open your booklet tomorrow. That's kind of the order to expect. So I wanted us to go through that so that we're not surprised. Do a quick thanks here to Kai. When do you use the word tax incentives? Great thing to use when we're talking about a solution. So if you want government to solve a problem, they can offer a tax incentive to citizens to do less of the thing creating that problem, or to switch to a new method of driving, building their homes, where they get their electricity, that's going to reduce a certain pollutant. So the government can use the tax incentive as a, kind of carrot to motivate citizens to take more sustainable or non-polluting actions. You want to be very specific. You don't want to use what my students call celery words. So shout out to Anthony from GRP this year that came up with this idea of celery words. Celery words are like, they don't really do anything. You don't invite somebody over for dinner and serve them celery. And on the APES exam, you don't write celery words. You don't write about pollution. That means nothing. We need an actual pollutant like CO2, SOx, NOx, particulate matter. And then we need, where is it going? It's going to the atmosphere, the soil, or the water. So we need pollutants, not just it's going to pollute the atmosphere. It's going to produce pollution. We don't want to say things are going to harm animals. Like that, again, that just means nothing. Like in a college level class, harm animals, no points. Never are you going to get points for it harms animals or plants. It causes a population to decline. It causes individuals to suffocate. It leads to infertility in organisms. It limits the photosynthesis that plants can do. Same thing with chemicals. Chemicals is like it's just a nothing burger of a word. It's like a celery burger of a word. It means nothing. Everything is chemicals. You're chemicals, I'm chemicals, everything's chemicals. So don't write about chemicals in the exam. You can talk about carbon monoxide. You can talk about SOx, NOx, lead, mercury, arsenic, asbestos, PCBs, endocrine disruptors, heavy metals. Be specific. Name a chemical, name a pollutant. Don't ever write it's going to cause chemicals to build up or pollutants to build up. Got to be specific. Same thing with humans. Don't write about making people sick. It's a respiratory irritant, or it damages their nervous system, or causes cancer. Don't write about something affecting. It's going to have bad effects on the ecosystem. It's going to have an effect on the organism. It's going to disrupt nutrient cycling. It's going to disrupt a food chain by removing a food source. So be specific. You just can't use these celery words and expect to get any points. All right. A couple other tips. Answer the 3 to 4 easiest points first. So don't spend all your time in FRQs 1 and 2 and then never make it to 3. The number of times when I'm grading an FRQ at the APES reading in Cincinnati, where I go in June, and you just see it drop off. You see the people that are grading FRQ number 3, they're like, the kids are writing so little compared to FRQs 1 and 2, because so many people just come out of the gate and they spend half the time on 1, then they spend like 40% of the time on 2, and then they get to 3 and they're just like, I'm done. And they just like mail it in and they write nothing on FRQ number 3, and they miss those easy points. There's gimme points on all 3 FRQs, and you need to get those gimme points first, and then you can go back. Let me answer this question that Natalia asked. Can you go out of order? Yes, absolutely. You're going to get your question booklet and you're going to be able to flip through it. Natalia, the one thing you should do though, and everybody should do this, is keep the questions actually in order on your paper. So for example, if you skip A and B and you answer C, write A, leave yourself a few lines, B, leave yourself a few lines, then go to C. So keep them in order on your paper, but then answer them in whatever order you want. Same thing with 1, 2, 3. You can flip back and forth between them. So do the easy questions on 1, then go to 2, do the easy questions, then go to 3, do the easy questions, and then you can sweep back through and pick up the harder questions. I interviewed a student who got a perfect exam score. That video is on the channel if you're interested in seeing it. That's what he did. He did the easiest questions on each one first that he was really confident about. He marked the hard ones. Then after he'd gotten all the easy ones, he went back and did a second pass through on the trickier ones. So that's a winning strategy for sure. All right, let's answer another quick question that's pragmatic. Unit 9, most heavily tested on the exam, 15 to 20%. After that, a bunch of units are all tied at 10 to 15%, Alex. But my order that I recommend is 9, 6, and 5. If you have to pick a couple tonight, 9, 6, and 5. All right. Other tips I recommend: be careful in the graph reading section. Someone asked earlier in the comments, can we have a ruler? You can't have a ruler, but you can use a different piece of paper. So like you can take, like, let's say you had a graph, and just like your graph is like here, you can take another piece of paper and you can like line it up so that you can kind of like use it like a straight edge to follow over on the graph. Oh, I'm at this point, so you can use another piece of paper like the straight edge of a ruler, and that will help you out there. Always push yourself for an extra layer of detail when you're talking about describe and explain prompts. So if you think you're there, I would say try to go one layer deeper if you have that layer of depth in your bag. And then on explain prompts, go 2 layers deeper. So you're trying to layer underneath your initial answer to connect it back to the prompt. That's the other big thing. Always connect back to the prompt. You don't want to just restate the prompt. You're not going to get any points for that unless you're quoting it for a variable, hypothesis, or control group, which I'll explain in a minute. But in general, there's going to be no points for just like quoting the prompt. And it's just a waste of your time writing. So just get right into your answer, but make sure your answer connects back to the prompt, and specifically the part of the prompt after the task verb. Let me just give you an example really quickly of what I mean by this. I will pull up those FRQs we just had again for a second. So what I mean by make sure your answer connects back to the prompt is we have describe a characteristic of manatees that increases their vulnerability to the recent decline of seagrass. So the characteristic we give about manatees, in our answer, we should say at the end, making them especially vulnerable to blank happening because of the decline of seagrass. So don't restate the answer, but show the reader, hey, my answer is connecting right back to the prompt. Or let's go down to D, part 2. Describe the change in energy flow through the trophic levels that occurs when there's a significant loss of seagrass. So you can say, like, with a loss of seagrass, energy is not going to flow to this trophic level. And by saying those pieces, you're really showing the reader, like, hey, I'm linking how energy is not flowing anymore from the seagrass to this other layer of the trophic level that I am talking about in my answer. So you're using some of the words in the answer to really link back to it, but you're not just like quoting. You're not saying the change in energy flow through the trophic level that occurs with no seagrass left is that, like, that's just such a waste of time. So just do not do that. Let's do one more example. Explain why the new beetle species will be better able to successfully populate this plot than the existing beetle species could. So this might sound silly, but like, you can't just say the new beetle species does this, this, and this. Compare it to the existing beetle species, unlike the existing beetle species, which has this characteristic. So in an explain, make sure, again, you link your answer back to that prompt. All right. This is our first sort of like breakpoint. We're going to go into experimental design tips here in a second. So I'll try to catch up on some of the super thanks that have come in. All right, we have a shout out to Miss Kuhn, the best environmental science teacher ever. That's awesome. Shout out to her. Got a shout out to Miss Trahan, 3rd period, strive for a 5. Absolutely, always want to strive for a 5. Shout out to Miss Diana John. She's in Ohio right now to grade. Oh, wow, that's very early. I didn't think anybody was out there that early, but sounds like she's a table leader maybe. Shout out to Miss Noble. This year's been great. Shout out to the GOAT, Angie Tooney, and Dana Jordan too, I guess. Much love, Mr. Dischinger-Smedes. All right, awesome. Thank you, Boris. Great picture of a tomato soup can there. Here's a good question. The curve should be similar, although John from Marco Learning has reported that they're considering making the APES curve more forgiving, meaning increasing the number of 5s. Don't quote me on it. No promises, but since there's such a low percentage of 5s and such a high percentage of 4s, I have heard that the College Board is considering adjusting the curve to make it a little easier to get a 5, but I wouldn't count on that. I would count on the curve being pretty similar to 2020. So that's a good question. Dylan just wants everybody to know that he's going to cook the exam. So we're glad to hear it, Dylan. Shout out to Miss Hornke, the best teacher ever. Yes, shout out to her. I did FRQ predictions last year and I was so wrong on all of them, but I'm going to try one this year. Maybe I'll make a little video later tonight before I go to bed with like a longer list, but here is my prediction for FRQs. I don't think you guys would be very happy with this, but I feel like there's a chance. I'm getting like a tingle my elbow, you know, like your grandma will say like, oh, I can feel it in my bones. There's a storm coming. I think we might have an El Nino La Nina FRQ this year. It's been a long time since they've had one. We just left, I think, an El Nino year, if I remember right. Or no, a La Nina. I can't remember. It was in the news recently. You know, we had conversations about it. So sometimes readers will kind of take into account recent things. Like when E.O. Wilson passed away a few years ago, some teachers predicted there'd be island biogeography question. That was one of his major contributions to science in his memory. And sure enough, there was. So you heard it here. There might be an El Nino La Nina question this year. That's my one prediction for now. Maybe I'll do a prediction video out later. I don't really know though, you guys. Just full disclosure, like I don't know. I'm just saying, hey, there hasn't been a question about this in a long time. So it's not like I write the questions or get to see them. Shout out to Miss Bergie. All right, excellent. Shout out to Mr. Sped, or Mrs. Sped. Sorry, she's iconic and amazing, and her hair is too awesome. And then we have one more shout out here to Mr. Slusser, best teacher. Wonderful. Love to see all the shout outs. All right, let's go on to some tips for experimental design. This is where students tend to struggle and where I really want to try to help you guys out. So this slide has a lot of text on it, but I would consider, if you're worried about experimental design, coming back to the slide and maybe even like taking some notes on this. So you really want to read that background experiment twice, the background paragraph about it. You want to read it twice. And you want to look for the IV and the DV while you're reading, independent variable and dependent variable. The way I teach my students, remember, is the IV is I, the scientist, manipulate and select and change this. So look for the words in the prompt: changed, different, the scientist designed for 4 different green bean species, or designed for plot A and plot B. They changed the level of pH in the tanks. So those words, change, different, design, select, those are going to clue you in and say, there's the independent variable that the scientist controls. One quick question, I will address this one. These slides are linked. They're in the video description. So go down to the video description beneath the video and you can get these slides. We're on slide 9 if you want to follow along. All right. DV, on the other hand, the data is how I remind my students. D for data. What's the outcome? What is being measured or collected at the end of the experiment after we've tweaked this independent variable? And then this red text off to the side is a reminder, these answers need to be on a level, an amount, a concentration of volume. It needs to be measurable and changeable. So you can't just say water is the dependent variable. What are we talking about? The amount of water, the volume, the clarity, the pH. You need to say the pH of the water in the tank. Like, make your answer for IV and DV longer than you think you have to. It is whether or not the green beans are genetically modified. So make it a long statement and make it conditional and quote it right from the paragraph. So I'll show you what I mean here in a second. The other thing you want to do is, if you have to do a hypothesis or a question, which there's a very good chance that you will have to do this, you want to use this formula that's on the screen. I would take a picture of this. I would take a picture of this slide, or go get these slides from the video description. Slide 10 here. Increasing or decreasing or changing the IV will increase or decrease the DV, or you could say change the DV in this way. So making green beans genetically modified will increase their yield compared to unmodified green beans. If you have to do a question, you just turn that statement into a question. Will genetically modifying green beans increase their crop yield compared to unmodified green beans? So you want to make sure that, you're using that kind of template. And then the final thing is, if you have a control group, it's the group that doesn't have the IV manipulated or altered, or sometimes it can be a before measurement. Here's a good one. If you're looking at a graph, oftentimes, I have heard this acronym before, dry mix. Dependent responding is on the y-axis. So the dependent variable or the one that responds to the independent, like you change the independent and the dependent responds to it, that's often on the y-axis. So we call it dry, the y and dry for y-axis. Manipulated independent for x. You manipulate it or you change it. It's independent. It's having the impact on the dependent. That's a good one. All right. Here's a practice one. So if you guys want to take a minute to practice this, leave a comment in the chat. What's the scientific question for this investigation? What's the dependent variable? We're not going to do H, but just try F and G. Try to identify the scientific question and then try to identify a dependent variable. I'll try to catch up on some supers while we wait for answers. We got another Dr. Vaca. Somebody tell Dr. Vaca to email me. I want to meet this famous Dr. Vaca whose students are so dedicated to trying to change his polluting Jeep to a Prius. Shout out Dr. Vaca. Definitely the most shouted out teacher in these live streams. All right, I've seen this question a few times. You got to skip it. So on an FRQ, your time is limited. And so you want to make sure you just skip any questions that you blank out on. So start on the questions that you know the answer to and invest your time there, Swanpa. And again, remember, if you know how to do the math, if you practice the math we're about to do in this video, and you practice more math tonight, you can't blank out on math the way you can blank out on APES content because it's a skill. It's not like a memorized fact that you do or don't remember. It's a skill that you can kind of reason through how to do. Same thing with graph reading, same thing with the experimental design. So Swanpa, one of my biggest pieces of advice would be make sure you first work on the experimental design questions that are skill-based, that you don't have to memorize content for. Those are on FRQ number 1. Then go to FRQ number 2 and get the graph or map questions, which you also have to memorize 0 APES content for. And you just have to read a graph carefully for at least 2 of the points. And then go to the math, which is going to be 6 points, which again come from no APES content, but they come from the skill of unit conversion, maybe rule of 70, maybe percent change. And you can memorize percent change and rule of 70 in 3 to 4 minutes. They're really simple formulas. And then you can follow along with the unit conversion we do shortly in this video in like 5 minutes. And that can hopefully give you a floor of like 3 to 4 points on each of those FRQs. And then you don't have to worry nearly as much if you blank out and forget a piece of content. All right. Let's see here. Pollack is correct. The dependent variable is going to be the amount of water collected. You could also say the appearance of the water collected. Oh, yeah, the APES logo is blocking some words. Let's get rid of that for right now. Thank you for pointing that out. Okay, let's see if we had anybody get the question. The question, oh, here we go. Is this the Terra that I think it is? Will the layer above the soil cause a difference in the turbidity of the water? I think I know this, Terra. Let's see if anybody else got it. Not to call people out, but I want to highlight some points that didn't get it and sort of point out why. Will the soil quality affect the amount of water collected by the trays? So this answer is really close, but we're not talking about soil quality. We're talking about what's covering the soil, wheatgrass or small wood chips. And so you got the dependent variable at the end correct. You got the independent variable, though, incorrect. It's not soil quality. It's the layer above the soil. So it's basically what we have above the soil. Oh, here we go. Will adding wheatgrass or small wood chips decrease the turbidity or water appearance? Mia, this is really good, but you'd want to be a little more specific. Will adding wheatgrass or small wood chips to soil decrease the turbidity of runoff? That would be a better way to really link this fully to the question. Yeah, it's tough. There's a lot of answers that are close, but not quite there on this one. Let's go through how you can kind of pick these out. So the first thing to do is to get the IV and the DV. The IV, one tray was seeded with wheatgrass and one tray was covered with small wood chips. That's what's changing because the scientists picked that. They changed it. So the independent variable is basically soil covering. It's wheatgrass or wood chips. And what those things are is their soil covering. So if you were asked for the independent variable, the question didn't ask you, but if it asked you, you would want to say the covering layer on top of the soil, or you might say like the presence of wheatgrass or small wood chips on the soil. The DV, most of you were able to pick that out, either water collected or water appearance. Really good question from Rebecca here. Pick one. They're only going to accept your first answer. If you list numerous, they're only going to take your first answer. Sometimes there's a distractor variable in there. Like at the beginning, they'll say limiting runoff on disturbed land improves soil and water quality. So you might be tempted at the beginning to say, oh, it's water quality because they said it at the beginning. But you need to keep reading and really look for the specific dependent variable that's being measured. And in this case, you're right, Rebecca, that there are two. You can just pick one, and the answer guide, the scoring guide, which I'll put on the screen now, is going to show both as acceptable. So you can see the correct answer for G is water collected or runoff volume or water appearance. So all three would be acceptable answers. Somebody just gave an awesome answer to F, right? Does the presence of a soil covering affect the amount or appearance of runoff? Oh, you're quoting the answer key. You must have looked this up. Sarah, if you truly did not look at the answer key and wrote precisely word for word what's on the answer key, that's impressive. But kind of looks like you might have looked up the answer key. All right, on to another practice step. Let's try another one here. So read this carefully. Look for the control group. Look for the scientific question. And then even though this question doesn't actually answer or doesn't ask you for independent and dependent, I want you guys to try doing the independent and dependent in the chat. So still list the independent and dependent in the chat. While you guys are trying that, I will try to answer some questions. Here's a good question from Elias. Does the scientific question have to be specific? Yes, it's got to be very specific. It needs to be basically, will changing the independent variable change the dependent variable? Or will increasing the independent variable increase or decrease the dependent variable. So it does need to be specific. It's not going to be general. It's not going to be like, how will soil quality be affected by plants being planted? Because we don't know what is going on with the plants being planted. We don't know what soil quality means. Are we talking permeability? Are we talking water holding capacity? Are we talking texture? Like, you need a specific variable. You do not want it to be vague. You can't say how much pollution will be produced by switching from an electric car, switching from a gas car to an electric car. What pollutant are we measuring? A good scientific question would be, what, how much will particulate matter emissions decrease by switching from gas to an electric car, right? Or will particulate matter emissions decrease, I should say. So you want to be specific, yes, and your dependent variable needs to be measurable. All right, so let me try to pull out some of the variables first. So Logan says the dependent variable is the harvest from the modified beans. It's going to be, here's what I wanted actually, sorry. It's going to be the crop yield of both kinds of green beans. It's just the crop yield of green beans. So that's the dependent variable. Let's see if anybody had the IV. So this person is really close, but the IV is not genetic modified green beans. It's whether or not the beans are genetically modified, because it needs to be a condition or a state. Here's a great scientific question. Will genetically modified green beans produce a higher yield than unmodified green beans? This is a great question, Alina. Sorry, there's people marching in the streets. I don't know if you guys can hear it on the mic. But letter A, yeah, is going to be plot D. That's the control group. Most people are correctly identifying that. Sorry, it's kind of distracting. They're marching because our state representative lives right around the corner from me. And so they like to march to her door and peacefully protest. Yeah, they're protesting El Nino, La Nina. Sorry, that has never happened. I've never been on a live stream before and had protesters marching by. All right. So here's our IV and our DV. Like I mentioned, IV is going to be the genetic modified status of the beans, whether or not they're genetically modified. And then the DV is going to be the harvest. So here is our answer key. We already kind of went through these answers, but you guys can see specifically the wording that they took on that scientific question point. All right, we're having a lot of content requests, and unfortunately, that's just not what I'm here to do tonight. I have some math review practice planned, and a lot of people need this. So for everybody that's asking for El Nino content, because I predicted that might be an FRQ, go watch the 4.9 video on my channel. Just Google APES 4.9 or YouTube APES 4.9. It'll be explained so much more concisely and effectively and with diagrams than I can explain it right now anyway. I script my videos, and so they're as efficient as I can be language-wise, and there's diagrams. So watch the 4.9 video. That will do a much better job than me talking about it right now with no visuals. All right. So here's some math tips. If you want to store formulas in your calculator, there are no rules against that. And there's a specific line in the College Board testing handbook that says that memory does not need to be cleared. And so if you go to my link tree, there is a slideshow in the link tree that has this slide here. These are the 4 quote unquote kind of formulas that you might have to do in APES. Unfortunately, there's no formula for dimensional analysis. The formula is just like desired units that you want to get to over on the right-hand side, and then you just are eliminating units until you get to the units you want. There really is no formula for dimensional analysis, but we'll practice dimensional analysis in a second. If you want to take a picture though of this slide and then memorize these formulas or store them in a calculator, you can. Again, there's no rule against that. I know that that's common practice for other exams, especially math exams, where memory does not have to be cleared ahead of time. So yeah, there's no rule against it. It says specifically in the handbook, memory does not have to be cleared on your calculator. If you want to know how to do that, there's a video explaining it on YouTube. You can look it up for TI-83, or I think there's a video link in one of the slides I have. What you can't do is you can't take exam material out of the exam. That's explicitly forbidden. So you're not allowed to like type things down that you see in the exam and take it. That can result in a score cancellation. You can't communicate with another calculator. So you can't have a calculator that can do, other communication. I wouldn't try to put other information in your calculator. It's going to be too hard to access for one. It's going to take too long. Your proctor might be like, what are you doing? And take your calculator from you because, they're not sure whether or not you're supposed to do that. It's a little bit of an ambiguous area. So I would not try to put other info in there. I would just remember new minus old over old times 100 and then 70 over R. You don't often need the population growth rate and you don't often need net primary productivity. So I would just memorize by doing percent change formula a couple times. Same thing with rule of 70. 70 over growth rate, that's the doubling time. All right, unit conversion. So if you're struggling with unit conversion, these steps can really help, I think. The first step is to write on the far right-hand side of your paper the units you need to get your answer into. So when I teach math to my students, I always tell them on the far right side of your paper, get the units that you need. So you need to calculate the gallons of water used by the population of Charlotte in 2018. So we're going to put gallons per year over on the far right side of our paper. And then we're just going to put our first number on the left-hand side. So our first number that we have is 90 gallons per person. So we're putting 90 gallons per person per day over on the left-hand side. And now what we have to do is get from gallons per person per day to gallons for all of Charlotte in a year. And when you want to get rid of units, we use a conversion factor. So we multiply by a fraction where the two things on either side of the fraction are equal to each other or are equivalent. And then we just make sure that we have our units on the opposite side in the conversion factor fraction that they are in this first fraction. So if we want to get rid of days, we're going to put days on top in our conversion factor and put years on the bottom, since years is where we want this eventually, gallons per year. And we're almost there, but this number, technically 90 times 365, that would be number of gallons per day, per year per one person. But we want it per a whole population of Charlotte. So in effect, we're going to multiply by the ratio of how many people to one Charlotte population, or just the number of people in Charlotte, which is 841,611. And that's going to give us an answer of 2.76 times 10 to the 10th, or what is that, like 27 billion, 600 million, something like that. 27, I think that's right. 2.76 times 10 to the 10th. So let's try it with a little bit trickier of one. There is going to be a Kahoot. I know people are asking about the Kahoot. The Kahoot will be in just a few minutes. We have this one last math question, and then we'll do like maybe 10 minutes or so of Kahoot. What I want you guys to do, though, is actually try this practice question. So get out some scratch paper or get out your calculator and try the practice question I have on the screen using that example we did above. So step number one is get your desired units or the units in your answer. Put that on the far right side of your paper. Then get your first number, put it on the far left side, and then just keep pulling all your unit conversion factors out of your sentence until you've used them all up and you're at your desired units. So give this a shot, and then I'll go over the answer in a minute or two. Good question here. No unit conversion sheet. Some units they expect you to know. They expect you to know 365 days in a year. They expect you to know 1,000 watts in a kilowatt. They expect you to know 1,000 grams in a kilogram. Those are the main ones. They expect you to know 24 hours in a day. They expect you to know 12 months in a year. So like the stuff that's kind of considered quote unquote common knowledge, they do expect you to know. So they're going to expect that you know that. They're not going to give you a sheet that says, hey, this many grams to this many whatevers. Seeing quite a few correct answers in the chat, even someone who sort of showed their work. So let's go through it here. First step is going to be to pull out kilowatt hours per year per house. And sometimes you'll want a compound unit in your denominator there, just to remind you that you need to get to both of those. So the next step then is to be able to pull out your first number, which is 4 hours of sunlight per day. So we put 4 hours over 1 day. And now we're just going to pull out our next number, which is 30 panels per one house. So now we're at the point where we have house on the bottom, which is what we want in our final answer. But we still need to get to kilowatt hours on top and years on the bottom. So our next step is to go panels to watts. So we have 30 panels per house. Since we had panels on the top, we put panels on the bottom. That allows us to cross that out. So now we're at hour watts per day per house. And we need kilowatt hours per year per house. So our next step is going to be to get rid of watts. So turning that into kilowatts. Now we have kilowatt hours per day per house. And our final step is just to get from days to years. So we go 365, that goes on top because days was on the bottom way back at the beginning. And now our final units, the only ones not crossed off, are hours and kilowatts, which is what a kilowatt hour is. It's just hours times kilowatts. And then we have per year per house on the bottom. And so that is our final answer. We just multiply everything through there and we get 13,140. So I saw a bunch of correct answers there. Here's the good news. If you can unsub, yeah, no way this is happening at 8 in the morning. This is one of the harder ones on that set. So each exam will typically have 3 different difficulties of math problem. They're going to have a pretty easy one that's like one step. Like literally just multiply one number times another. Or do rule of 70 divided by the growth rate. Then they're going to have one that's in the middle that's like 2 steps, maybe 2 or 3 steps. And they'll typically have one that's harder that's like 4 steps. So you can skip the hardest one if you want and still have a good chance of earning 4 out of 6 math points on the easier ones. Good question. Where can you find practice problems? Go to the YouTube channel and search APES Math. There's a whole bunch of practice problems in that video. Not only will it explain to you how to do the practice problems, but there's also more practice problems linked in the Ultimate Review Packet, and you can get that math review packet in there. You can also just Google dimensional analysis free practice. There's a bunch of them on the internet. There's also one linked in the 4-day study plan that is still up on my link tree. 4-week study plan. All right, good question. It's time now for just a little bit of Kahoot because I do have to get over and do the Ultimate Review Packet Q&A in like 10 minutes or so. And so we are going to do a little bit of Kahoot. I've never done Kahoot on a live with 2,200 people. It's going to cap at 400, unfortunately. So we'll try it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. It's not going to play the music, I don't think, because the mic I'm using, it's just not going to work. So there's going to be no music, which takes some of the fun out of Kahoot. But we'll do a few minutes of it. All right. This might be a disaster. We might have to close the Kahoot down if it's not working, but we'll see how it goes. Oh boy. That's something else. It's going to hit 400 pretty quick. So unfortunately, once we hit the 400 person limit, Oh, there we go. 3, 4. Oh, we went way past 400. I don't know if it's gonna let us start or what's gonna happen. Oh, you guys are locked in. I want to know if we're gonna get all the way to 2,248 people in the Kahoot. All right, we're gonna get started so you guys can play some of this. I don't know what's gonna happen. Your guess is as good as mine. Oh. So some of these are old questions from the 2017 exam. Which is good because that's been a while. All right, can block the digestive tract, and they could allow toxic chemicals to accumulate. Boy, toxic chemicals, that's pretty vague. I'd want to see like PCBs in there, you know, for a real solid exam answer. But all in all, people are doing pretty solid. Looks like they did let more than 400 people play. And I already won is in the lead, so how fortuitous. Oh, you guys can hear the music? Oh, it's playing it for you guys on your computer? Or it's like playing it through the YouTube live stream? Someone confirm that for me because that's really interesting. Are you hearing the music through the YouTube live stream, or are you hearing the music on your Kahoot tab? Oh, through the stream. Because it's not playing out loud for me because I'm using a Rode mic that's plugged into my headphone jack. And so it's not playing, but it's feeding it into the stream still. Interesting. All right, really well done on this one. You want to make sure if you talk about eutrophication, you do talk about algal blooms. All right, we got a new leader. The Kahoot pin is here. In case anybody's looking to join late, there's the Kahoot pin. Let's see if I can. Oh, it's going too fast to pin. All right, another good one. People are cooking here. This Kahoot might be a little bit too easy, but we'll see. Maybe it gets a little tougher. There's a Kahoot pin. Anybody needs that? All right, so how are we going to get large pieces of plastic out during primary treatment? Screen or filter, sometimes called a grate. Yeah, these ones are pretty easy. I should have picked a harder Kahoot. Yeah, the Kahoot, the chat is not nearly as lively with the Kahoot going on. Henry, you'll go to the ultimate review packet to join that stream. So Henry's got a great question. As soon as we're done with Kahoot here, and I don't know that we'll go through all 26 questions. Well done, though. You guys continue to cruise on this Kahoot. You'll just go to the ultimate review packet. You'll sign in, and then on the left-hand side, there will be a link to open the live stream. That's just the Q&A session for the ultimate review packet. And it will happen basically pretty much as soon as this one ends, or a few minutes after. I'll probably go to the bathroom, maybe get a new LaCroix, stretch my legs, and then I'll hop right on. So it will probably be like 8:10 or so. All right, another good question here. How many decimal places should you round to? Rebecca asked, safest to go to the 10th place or the whole number. It's hard to say. Unfortunately, they're not always the same. Like the scoring, it sort of depends on how close you are, what you're talking about. Like if you're talking about like animals or something, like stuff that is hard to be like a point whatever, it's good to go to the nearest whole number. But if you're talking about something like acres or like milliliters or like dollars, then probably to the 10th place would be safe. The one thing you don't want to do, this is a really important point, is you don't want to take like each step on your FRQ and like write the answer. Like you don't want to do like 10 times 3 and then write 30 and then like actually hit enter and type that out and then like divided by 17.3 and then write like whatever that number is. You want to keep the numbers preserved in your calculator the whole time. You don't have all these rounding errors at each step of the calculation. Another good question while we let the Kahoot just cruise in the background. Do APES readers grade harshly? It might feel harsh if you like to what you're expecting per se. Like you might have a lower score than you think you're going to get. I find a lot of students have that, but I don't think they grade harsh. They grade accurately based on the scoring rubric. So the scoring rubric is often fairly strict, meaning it's really going to have specific requirements, vocab terms, precision in your answers, and not just sort of vague ideas that like circulate the answer, but really being precise and specific. So they don't want to take points from you. They want to grade your answer as accurately as possible based on the rubric. And so we're trained on how to grade accurately. And then that's our goal, is to grade it accurately based on the rubric. So I wouldn't say it's harsh, but I would say it might feel strict. Like they do have a high bar. We really want you to demonstrate that you understand the concept being asked. And that's why using vocabulary from the Quizlet sets can be so helpful. It helps communicate that you understand what you're talking about. There you go. Yeah, especially yellow, especially shoreline stabilization. Great ecosystem service because it prevents damage to homes and loss of property. All right, let's keep it cruising here. We'll do a few more Quizlet questions before we wrap things up and do the Ultimate Repacket Q&A session for those folks. While we're going, let me see if there are some super chats we missed. We did have a shout out to Dr. Griffith. I'm really impressed. Oh, actually, let's look at this Kahoot question, because this is the first one that people have really struggled with. Identify the characteristic of a case strategist that makes them prone to extinction. High parental care equals few opportunities to pass on genes. Sometimes, not all case strategists, though, have only few opportunities to pass on genes. Like there are a number of them that have a fair number of gene passing on opportunities. Late age for first pre-production, that can make them vulnerable to extinction. Long gestation period equals few opportunities for reproduction. This is a better pairing because if you have a really long gestation period, that does typically mean you're going to have few opportunities to reproduce because you're spending so long gestating or caring for the organism inside your body if you're a mother case strategist. So that one was tricky. Late age for first reproduction doesn't necessarily make you vulnerable to extinction if you're getting a lot of parental protection. So that was a tough question. All right, we've got shout out to Dr. Cook as well. Again, lots of people with professors or I shouldn't say professors, but people with a doctoral degree as their teacher in high school. That's cool. Shout out to Miss Blocker. Your students love you, and it's your birthday. We got a shout out from Dylan. Thanking you, Mr. Smedes. Oh, thank you, Dylan. That's very kind of you. Remember, all these super chat thanks are going to a local environmental nonprofit in Grand Rapids. My students are going to vote on one, decide on it, and we'll do a little video updating you guys when we donate this money to that environmental nonprofit. Shout out to Miss Mick, your 5-period APE scholar appreciates you. Got just another thank you from Kimmy. Kimmy, we hope you get a 5. Or Timmy, sorry, I saw the K and switched it. Timmy K, we hope you get a 5. Let's see. Shout out to Mrs. Nixon, her first year teaching APES, and she's absolutely amazing. I know she's nervous about us testing tomorrow, but I know we're prepared. Awesome. Like I've said many times before, it is really hard your first year teaching. And so props to any teacher who's in their first year teaching APES. Make sure you let those teachers know you appreciate how hard they worked. Max says, took a practice exam and having trouble calculating my score. Any recommended calculators? There should be one in my link tree. I'm pretty sure there's one in there. I do know that also, though, the albert.io calculator is accurate because I actually emailed them to get them to change it because it was inaccurate before. But the albert.io, go to Albert, just search Albert APES calculator. That one should be accurate as well. But I thought there was one in my link tree. We got another shout out to Miss Borgie. Shout out to Miss Ricardo. Shout out to Miss Cobb, the goat. Bah, bah. And finally, my teacher said she'd quit if I get a 5. I hope that's because she's like close to retirement and that's how she wants to kind of go out on top, you know? Then we've got thanks for the help. Oh, never mind. I didn't mean to put that one on the screen. Shout out to Mrs. Aw. Yes, go Mrs. Aw. That's a cool name. All right. This one tripped up some people. Identify one change in the water quality of streams within a watershed that has been deforested. So decrease in nutrient concentration. We're going to expect an increase in nutrient concentration as more sediments flood into the river or the body of water, right? We're increase in pH. I don't know if there's going to be like a dramatic pH effect. If anything, there might be a decrease if we have like more leaching of like, heavy metals. Actually, I don't know if that would really even affect it. You're typically not going to have a huge like pH change. That's not going to be one of the major effects you're looking for with deforestation, but an increase in water temperature for sure because of less shade and just increased, soil temperatures. Good question here. What should I bring to the APES exam? It's my first time. Just a calculator if you want your own. Some schools provide them to students, but I would err on the side of caution and bring your own calculator, especially one that you're comfortable using. Oh, he's back. I saw the comments. We don't love deforestation. We're gonna get evil Smedes out of here. Yeah, I don't know who that is. I will say So sometimes my curiosity gets the better of me. And so I clicked on Evil Smedes' YouTube account, and they joined YouTube in, I think, 2022, if I remember right. So it's not someone who just cranked this spam account up like yesterday for the live stream. This is a burner account that's been lurking, that's been on the back burner for a while. Unless they changed their channel name, they could have done that actually. All right, well done. Kahoot is too easy, but that's okay. It's good to build your confidence and do a little warm up. Here's a fun question. What did you get on your AP test? I didn't take AP Environmental Science. My high school didn't offer it. So I didn't even know it was a class until they offered me to teach it. All right, let's talk about this. Oh, wow. I'm guessing people didn't recognize this as a waterborne disease, cryptosporidium. And some people thought it was an STD. But don't worry, you would not be expected to just know what cryptosporidium is like off the top of your head. They would define that for you if it was in like the background of something. So I think the teacher that made this Quizlet or this Kahoot probably had that like background text for students. All right, I've seen this one a few times. You don't necessarily need to memorize all the cycles. Like I would not spend your last few minutes of studying tonight memorizing all the steps of the biogeochemical cycles. I would think about like photosynthesis and respiration being big parts of the carbon cycle. I would think about nitrogen fixation being a big part of the nitrogen cycle, and then infiltration and runoff being a big part of the water cycle. If you're nervous, review those for maybe 10 minutes or so, but don't spend tons of time tonight on unit 1 with the cycles because it's only 6 to 8% of the exam. Spend your time tonight on 9, 6, and 5 if you want to do content review. Oh, this one tripped some people up. Oh, I guess not so much. They just picked only yellow. Okay. You can put just NOx in most cases. The only time you can't just put NOx is if you're actually specifically describing the breakdown of photochemical or the formation of photochemical smog. So it'd be safer to say NO2 is broken down into a free oxygen and to NO, and that free oxygen combines with O2 to form O3. So you wouldn't just want to say the sunlight breaks down NOx. In that case, you'd want to actually say NO2. All right, this one people did pretty solid on. I like though blue as an answer that really walks through the actual like science of this. Potential energy in the stored reservoir, that water that's built up behind the dam. Kinetic energy then spins or is water flowing down the intake shaft or whatever you want to call it, the penstock, and then it's going to spin the turbine. We call that mechanical energy. And then there's an electromagnetic generator that's going to turn that kinetic energy into electricity. So going through that sequence is definitely helpful. Remembering that verbiage, like if you had an FRQ that asked you to like explain how a hydroelectric dam generates electricity, you would definitely want terms like potential energy in the reservoir, kinetic energy as the water is allowed to flow downhill, mechanical energy as the water spins the turbine blades, converted to electrical energy by the generator. That'd be a tough question, but that would be kind of the sequence you'd want to follow. All right, I think we have just a few questions left. I guess we will just go all the way through, and then that URP live stream will start right after. So 8:10-ish, or no, it's 8:10 right now, 8:15-ish. And again, to get to the Ultimate Review Packet live stream, you have to go to the Ultimate Review Packet website, sign in, and then you'll get access to that link right inside the URP. All right, we got someone who's 5 bound. Fecal Chief is 5 pound. It's a great username if you work at a wastewater treatment plant. Oh man. Shout out to Mrs. Speed. She's an amazing teacher. Excellent, Mrs. Speed. Sounds like your students are big fans. Here's a good question. Not a lot directly. I've chatted with them before. AP YouTube's a small space. So, you know, here or there, we've touched base a little bit, but I haven't like met him in person or anything. But I talked with Mr. Sin a lot more from the Mr. Sin channel. So the AP Human Geo, AP Psych. He's great. He shares a lot of good ideas. So him and Mr. Clifford and some of those other AP YouTubers, we all kind of chat and share ideas. Mr. Clifford's great. He is awesome. I love that he did Crash Course too. I think that's so cool. He did Crash Course Economics as a host, which is really, really awesome. He's really funny too. Like I think Mr. Clifford's got great on-screen energy. I'm a little lower energy than Mr. Clifford, but I love his style. I think it's good. He does econ movies. I think that's great too. Like how the economics concepts he teaches relate to movies. So yeah, big fan of Mr. Clifford. Evil Smedes, we might need to do a collab where we help you reform from your fossil fuel, impervious surface loving, deforestation loving ways and show you the ways of a more sustainable future, maybe. All right, people are doing real well on these Quizlet or in these Kahoot questions. They're, like I said, they're probably a little too easy. I wouldn't expect the exam questions to be this easy, but these are still good concepts to review. All right, Grant wants a shout out to Oreos. Oreos are pretty good. Definitely a fan of Oreos. Mr. Smedes, evil Mr. Smedes FRQ face-off. Yeah, when the FRQs come out, so they'll be released roughly 48 hours after the exam. So our exam's on a Thursday. And so that means like Friday. So like Saturday, the FRQs should come out. I always download the FRQs right away and write them. I set myself a 70-minute timer without looking up any resources or books or anything on the internet. And I just write them. And then when the scoring guides come out the next fall, they're released publicly, then I score them to see how I did. And I usually don't get 10 on all three. Like I'll go like 9, 9, 10, or like sometimes I'll even get an 8. Like there's really tough questions. So even teachers don't get every single question on an FRQ. But that would be fun to do an FRQ face-off with Evil Smedes. All right. So our winner was Caitlin, and then Eric, and then KT. Well done. You get recognition in front of the APES community. You have gained a small amount of YouTube clout for your success here. So, you know, the APES community pays their respects to you. Well done. Especially Caitlin. Top, what is that, like a panda bear maybe or something? I don't know. But anyway, well done. Well done on the Kahoot. FRQ predictions, this has been a popular one. The only one that I've said so far, and again, I have no idea, you guys. I'm just pulling these out of my hat. But El Nino, La Nina, it could happen. You know, it's getting to be a long time since they've asked about it. It is a major topic. And so let's just do an El Nino, La Nina real quick, just in case it comes up on the FRQ. El Nino, you're going to think a weakening or reversing of the trade winds, warmer surface waters in the ocean pooling over by the Americas, warmer surface temperatures generally on Earth because of that warm water pooling, bad fisheries in the Americas because it's warmer and it suppresses the upwelling. But that's going to mean that you're going to have dry or maybe drought-like conditions in Australia and Southeast Asia. And then everything just flips when you go to La Nina. La Nina, think LA, larger than normal eastern trade winds, right? So those trade winds going from east to west, and that's going to blow the warm surface water back over towards the western side of that equation, which is Australia, Southeast Asia. That's going to lead to heavier rainfall there and drier conditions over in the Americas, but it's going to be better for fishing because of all that upwelling that brings those cold nutrient and oxygen-rich waters up to the surface. If you want a deeper dive into El Nino and La Nina, Google APES 4.9. The video will come right up, and that will be a much better way to review it than me talking about it more here. All right. If I have time tonight before I go to bed after the URP Q&A session, maybe I'll do a few more FRQ predictions. They're just kind of fun. Last year, I made some and I was wrong on every single one. I did like 5 of them and every single one was wrong. So maybe I'll get one of them right this year. But again, don't take these things and think, oh, this is what I have to go study so much. It's just, when you teach APES for 9 years and you read the FRQs every year, you kind of feel like, oh, okay, maybe there's a sense that this is coming up. So who knows? FRQ on El Nino and La Nina, maybe it could happen, but I wouldn't count on it. I would study Unit 9 and 6, brush up on El Nino and La Nina a little bit if you want. All right. We'll answer this last super chat that just came in, and then we're going to go to the Ultimate Review Packet. So you just log into the Ultimate Review Packet, and the link will be right on the top at the left-hand side. Any final words of wisdom, how to not freak out last-minute review? Yes. So Pizza Hunter, good question. When you get your FRQ booklet, MCQ, I think there's less freak out because it's like, okay, I got answer options to pick from. Take a deep breath. But really, especially if your heart races or your chest feels tight, this is a breathing technique that can really help. You take a deep breath in, and then you hold it and you take another one as much as you can in through your nose. And you breathe out through thinly pursed lips as long as you can. Shoot for like 20 seconds, 25 seconds. So again, breathe in and then take a little bit more. You want to like as much as you can inhale. And then you're going to breathe it all out slowly through your mouth. When you breathe out slowly through your mouth, especially through thinly pursed lips so that it has to go slow, your heart rate has to slow down. I don't know exactly which nerve is activated that does this, but it's human physiology. It's just like a mechanical thing that's going to happen for your body. So if you do that, especially 2 or 3 times, your heart rate will slow down. You can hopefully then proceed with intention. All right. Good luck, everybody. Take that deep breath when you open your FRQs. Get the easy points first, then go on to the harder points. That will build your confidence, and that will also make sure that you put your best brain power on those easy points that you make sure that you earn so that you don't lose points that you could have otherwise earned. All right. Best of luck, everybody. Thanks so much for coming to the live streams. Grab yourself a LaCroix maybe tomorrow morning to get yourself nice and ready for that exam. And as always, think like a mountain, write like a scholar, and make sure to get 8 hours of sleep tonight. 8 hours of sleep is key. That is much better than staying up